Okay, the stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adventure on So Many Levels. We're going to play some Dungeons and Dragons.
Woohoo!
D&D. Is it
Dungeons
spooky season
and
now?
Dragons.
So, I'm Christiana Ellis, and I am the Dungeon Master. Our players tonight, Starla Hodgton as Carolina Swift,
Hello, friends.
Jenny Meltzer as Zaylene,
Oh, hi.
Paul Fisher as Zinhorn Windborn,
Good evening.
and Mark Kilfoyle as Vertigo, or Nedry, or Nedrigo, or did a new name get settled?
I think I might be finally done with questions and it's time for answers.
Oh. I mean, I think you kind of always wanted answers, right? But maybe it's time for you to supply your own answers. I like
Make
that.
my own truth.
Awesome. So, when last we left our heroes, the Pocket Protectors, they had returned back to the flying castle known as Sunya Dion Torbella, the home of their patron, Lord Yobert Relenth, and their various friends who also live in that castle. And you had been informed by one of them, Sorashana, that a strange entity that she knows through her dreams named Kosh wanted to speak to you. And in traveling to the realm of dream to speak to him, you learned a great many things. You learned that at least to hear Kosh tell it, he is in fact sort of an echo, the imprisoned hope of the Titan for whom the pillar was his left behind weapon. And he suggested that although it would literally break your brains for him to answer all your questions, that he had seeded parts of a machine to various inventors throughout the cosmos. And if all those pieces were put together, perhaps they could do something about the pillar. But in the meantime, you also have a lot of other stuff going on. There are these portals to the realm of dreams spilling nightmares into the material plane all over the place. Maybe even not only the material plane, but those are all over the place. You know that the construct makers and the siphoners from Dinuthair are still at large. Who knows what they're up to? And then there was the nightmare dragon that you almost were defeated by at one point. There's a lot going on. But now that you are on your way back to Pashan, you are told that you have been summoned to an impromptu but high-level council being held at the Imperial Palace, where representatives from all over Sekamian have been brought together to discuss everything that's happening and what needs to be done about it. And all of you, by virtue of you having firsthand knowledge about many of those things, are desired as witnesses for this council. So I think you were going to be a couple of days out. Actually, I'm forgetting. It was a couple of days worth of travel from the Marishka Temple back to the Pashan, right? By flying
We've
castle.
never gone straight.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
So, but
We've never, ever gone
I'm
straight.
just double checking my own memory that it was a couple of days worth of travel.
At
And
least,
I
yeah.
think that
It
there
should
was,
be, yeah.
yeah. So
At
I
least
think
two.
you are en route. You have been given the impression. We didn't really. We're not role playing out you being told that there's this council happening. I think you just you are filled in that this communication came in while you were all undergoing your dream journey. And so you are hurrying back there. There was a suggestion, Yobert tells you, that if there was a way you could get there faster, that would be better. But it's, they don't have the resources to spare right now to have someone teleport out to you and then back.
It might be better to go slower, actually. We did not sleep well. In fact, the opposite.
Because I recall, at least I still have it marked on my sheet as 4 levels of exhaustion. So,
Oh, that's
Oh,
right.
I'm fine.
oh yeah, you're fine. That's right.
Y'all look so tired.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna need to
He's gonna
sleep.
sleep the
Yeah.
whole way back.
I think Yobert says my expectation would be that this is something that temple officials in Pashan could probably assist you with magically. Ordinarily, it would be quite an expensive request for the average individual, but these are not average times. But certainly, I think the downside of taking more time is that who knows what might yet transpire between now and then. But certainly, you all look terrible.
But because we took that nap, for me, does that count as a long rest?
Yes.
Okay. So I think I can change my spells and I can actually help at least like 1 or 2 people. Get rid of some exhaustion.
So I think that it makes sense that those of you who still need it would be able to, now that you've been told this and that you're on your way anyway, you might as well go ahead and complete a long rest. It will be, another few hours for those of you who have this levels of exhaustion, but you'll be able to remove 1 level just for completing the long rest. And yeah, and that's the way it works, is that short of any magical removal of exhaustion, 1 long rest removes 1 level of exhaustion.
Lesser
That is-
restoration that gets rid of levels of exhaustion.
Greater restoration does, yes.
Greater, yeah.
Oh, it's greater. I thought.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Restoration,
No.
but-
Yeah, and greater does have a material cost as well. I mean, that could probably be managed, but it's, not trivial.
It's like diamond dust worth 100 gold, and we have a bunch of diamonds, so we could just smash them up if we needed to.
Yep.
Um,
And we have 2 clerics who can cast greater.
Yeah.
Mhm.
so like even if we just took a day, like we could theoretically get rid of a lot of
Yeah.
that exhaustion.
I think you've been en route already, so let's, for the moment, assume that you've all now completed that first long rest, and so those of you who had the exhaustion are now to 3 levels of exhaustion, and that you have basically about another 24 hours of travel to go to get back to Pashan. So, I think, Yobera is just letting you know that it has been some time since there have been representatives from so many different places and factions all within Pashan at the same time. My understanding is that some of the elves from Far Rasha atop Mount Rashama, and I suppose below Mount Rashama, have appeared. There are dwarves from the Barrier Mountains, elves from the Lochtor Forest, representatives even from Villanocta, is my understanding, and Emerit Arboris. And my understanding too is that this is no mere delegates or ambassadors being sent. This is a summit. But I also can tell you, as I have already, that although in some respects Pashan has been spared some of the chaos from these nightmare incursions due to the presence of Empress Solomonia's paladins and clerics that she created, I believe that there is quite a bit of disruption elsewhere in the world, and That is not to mention some of the larger threats from what you've told me. We may not have a lot of time to before the construct makers and the siphoners may prove their own level of threats. And I have received, while you are all asleep, notification that apparently an heretofore unknown ancient dragon has attacked Villanocta and is making its lair there.
Which one would that be? Is it hollow?
I just told you what I know. This happened hours ago.
Ancient dragon.
In the meta, this is the nightmare dragon. Hello, you guys.
Yes.
There's like
Yeah.
3 or 4 dragons floating around. So it's
Yeah,
like,
is there a notable one that you specifically saw escape from a portal tear and was at large? Maybe that's it.
I mean,
Anyway.
Yeah.
But yes, Yobera doesn't have any of that information. He only knows that there's apparently been a dragon attack and that it was not driven off.
As do you know if it'll come to me? Has any contact or party from the siphoners or the construct makers, or indeed a third group without an entirely solid name, have any of them, do you know, made any contact with anyone?
Vertigo or Nedry, or you have a preference? Now,
You may address me as you wish.
all right. Well, that doesn't actually answer my question. That's fine. You're asking a lot of good questions of someone who does not have those answers. I have only sending spells and the brief sorts of messages that have been transmitted to me in requesting you for a summit. I am sure that whatever is known to anyone will be discussed at the summit. I don't have the answers for you, I'm afraid.
Well,
It was
I
just an
believe
opportunity.
Ivy still has the sending stone.
Uh-huh.
She might be a good person to ask.
Well, but what I'm trying to illustrate again is just how much can you really have these conversations over sending? Like, it's not, it's
and it's still only been a couple of days.
well,
too, right?
it's also you are going to the place where you will get all of this information, but you're basically demanding all of it before you get there. So I'm just saying that the communication is disrupted and limited while you are en route. They don't have the answers to your questions. A lot of this stuff is not known by anybody because how would they know? You are the ones that know what the threats are. You know, you four know more than anyone else in the world right now about what's
All
going
right.
on.
I think someone's buying us noodles.
Yay, noodles!
Are you referring to me? I mean, I'm happy to buy noodles.
I was making a joke, sir. There's a really nice noodle stand on the Skywatch near the tower.
Oh yes, I'd have Brennan pick us up noodles from there frequently. As whenever he wasn't up to making something on his own. And
Good stuff.
Brennan says, I like the axe beak broth. So, in any case, while I reiterate that the information that you're going to get when you get there, you don't get before you get there, is there anything else you would want to do while you are traveling?
I would want to see if Sorshana has had any more luck with. She was working on a device to pull specific cards from the Vidunme deck.
Yes. I think that she does not have that ready. It is something that she and Sequential have been working on. She says that there is some elusive factor that has been, like, they haven't been able to nail down what's missing. Like, they keep trying things that seem like they should work, but then don't work.
I wonder.
All I got is they should try things that shouldn't work, and maybe those will work, but that doesn't seem right.
I was thinking along the same lines. A lot of the magic of Dinethir, it's probabilistic in nature, based on rarities and coincidences. And it might mean that some of the intentional stuff doesn't work because it destroys coincidence. But I'm not really sure how one unintends things. I mean, I've
So
done a
quick-
lot of things unintentional, but that wasn't really helpful.
Quick question. Did our friends from the temple come with us?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Just making sure.
Well, you're assembling quite a crew here, so yes, they are coming along, and obviously, they can fill in lots of pieces of their own part of the story here, but I will just reiterate to you, because you all seem to feel like this can't possibly be true, but I will reiterate, as far as what's currently going on in Dinuthair and what the active threats are, nobody knows more than you do. In fact, that is why you are being summoned to this summit, is because they don't already know this stuff.
Not to add
Alright.
on to their research log, but
Perhaps Rupino has some insight into some of these creations. And also, perhaps, all three of them might have some instincts as to these devices and their pieces. If they might wish to take a look at them in the meantime.
Yeah,
I'm not in the mode of insight at the moment.
Rubino is very happy to, distract himself by assisting with some of these things. And I think he doesn't just instantly say, "Oh, well, here's your problem," and then flip the safety switch off or something. But yeah, he will help.
I assume all of these are long-term research things
Yeah.
anyway. So it's mostly if we don't start now or never get started. So
Yeah, and I think that in your mind, Vertigo, Cankers says it may be that the problem they're having with the deck is that they're not willing to give up anything to get it.
Interesting observation.
and after a few moments of slow thought, he'll pass that observation on to them.
The other nature of this magic is balance. What you get, you must give. Not necessarily the same thing, but something. Be careful with that. The costs may be high.
And I think Rupino just gives you a look like, you're telling me.
Well, more to sequential than Sorashana.
Sure, yeah,
with the-
I
with
know,
the core
and
value.
and I think that even after a moment, Rupino kind of just softens a little bit and says, "I'm sorry, we're all kind of on edge right now."
Everything is kind of soft at the moment for me. But I understand what you mean.
So, I think all of you perhaps are just taking some time to decompress a little bit, to rest a little bit. Please let me know if I'm skipping over any specific business you wanted to get to, but otherwise we can go ahead and move things forward. You relax some, being back among friends in a familiar location for the first time in a while. I mean, the tower's great, but it's a little cramped. You missed some of your friends, I'm sure. They missed you.
Do how how many days are we there? Like, do we know how many greater restorations we will need to do?
Well, I mean, you tell me. So I got you. You were all at the point where there was three levels of exhaustion, and you had 24 hours travel to go.
Okay, so I can do 3.
I could
Actually,
do
I can
2.
do 4, but then I won't have any like higher spells.
Oh,
But
can
if we do
I?
it as we're traveling, then you get them back when we get there.
I can do it at a higher level, can't I? Duh.
Yeah, you can do it all the way up to like
So-
levels.
You will have the opportunity to do one more long rest in that time.
I can do
Okay.
6.
All right, so I will do 3, you do 3, and we just hope we don't encounter any like space pirates or anything weird like that.
All right. Do you
Um,
all
I
have
can
the
do
diamonds on hand to do that much?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm just
I
saying, make
had,
sure you
like,
account for it. Is
5.
all. Yeah.
Okay.
I think like we both had some of the 500 ones, so really like we would only have to
So-
crush like one of those.
If you do
a
3 and I do
piece.
6, we're done.
You don't need to do 6 unless,
I
well, yeah,
only
I
need
guess
to
you
do
do
3.
because you need to do them for yourself.
So
But
You-
we have one
We
more
only
long
need to
rest
do
come.
2.
One more long rest. We only
2
right.
each. Yeah.
Yeah,
we need
so
six.
I
6
need to-
total.
So wait a sec. I've got 3 levels. Mark
Okay.
has 3
Okay.
levels.
Yeah,
Starla has
listen,
3 levels. That's
We're gonna have
9
one more
spells.
long
Paul,
rest.
yes,
okay?
one more long rest, and then you will all be down to 2.
Right.
So, really,
unless
we
you
only
want,
need
so
2.
you can spend the money to do that before the long rest,
I got. All right.
or you can spend enough for 2 each, and then the long rest will get you back to normal.
Okay. We do 2 each.
Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
All right. So, spending a lot of time in bed, recuperating, but also using your magical resources to call upon your various sources of divine healing to restore your energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think. Are any of you kind of just reflecting on kind of the nature of how that all came to you? Just the, like what are you thinking about that as you recover? There's any thoughts?
I think that I would be asking Lynn because I only saw like the flashes of it. I
Mhm.
wasn't really there to experience it. So I would be there like
Mm-hmm.
asking, what was it like? And
I mean, it just felt like having a conversation, and then all of a sudden we're waking up and just absolutely exhausted. So these things that you described, that that we were in the state we were in, that it didn't feel like that at all.
wow,
Yeah.
that's weird.
Yeah. I
Greater
mean,
restoration.
kind of felt, like it was like weirdly exhilarating.
It's very much, as he was describing, kind of two sides of the like if you look at it differently, I guess. So from your perspective, it looked like we were really suffering, but for our perspective, we seemed fine.
But like also, he kind of looked like a monster, but kind of not. Did you see that?
Well, if you were just looking at Kosh, he was a chained monster, a horror. But when you looked at his reflection in the mirror, he looked like, he didn't look like that. So it's a duality sort of thing. And that was one of the things that he had talked about was looking at things from a different perspective, and they changed somehow. But I am not entirely sure what he meant by looking at the nightmares from a different perspective. I don't know what perspective I should be looking at them from. To, yeah, I don't. I'm not the smart person that figures these things out.
Don't sell your brain short.
I have my skills, but I have my shortcomings. Yeah, it was all very,
Reflects on that time that you got drawn into the shiny room. That was so sad.
Yeah, I am not wise.
It's
So,
okay.
so I think as you are coming in to Pashan, Yobera receives a communication that is a request for all of you basically to report to the palace immediately, and you'll be escorted. The the various people gathered are gonna, they've not all just literally been 24/7 in the same room, but they have been eagerly awaiting your testimony and are going to be assembled in anticipation of your imminent arrival. So tell me how you all dress for this.
Well, you know what I put on because I took them out and washed them today. I got my black and white striped tights on.
I have my best cleric robes, and I don't think I'll need my armor for this, so I put it back in its bottle. But, I still have my backpack with me.
Okay. Are you bringing Buster?
I think Buster can sit this one out.
All right. I'm assuming that Talitha and Trenanal and Rupino are coming. I think that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We have two of you that still need to say what's your summoned to World Affairs Council look.
Probably not too much different, but like the nicer version, the one that's clean. No monster gore and stuff on it.
Just makes me think of
Maybe
Dragon
the
Age.
stitching is a little fancier, but yeah.
Dragon Age, how sometimes, if you've just had an encounter that still have got the blood spatter all over you during the
Persistent gore,
cutscene.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think they probably lay out the different outfits they've had over a while now on their bed. Kind of look at each of them representing a different element of where they've been. And I think it's an amalgam of the kind of three different outfits. The coat he's taken to wearing recently, which is a bit more muted blue. The sort of comfortable breeches with many pockets that he would have worn in the Fey lands. But over top of all of that, maybe not as full as it once was and somewhat tattered and worn from travel, are his simple scholar's robes, kind of draped over all the rest of that. The hood back, still maintaining the two large books that he has always strapped to his hips. Yeah, I think that's probably an amalgam.
All right. I think Talitha, Trananel, and Rupino don't have much in the way of a vast wardrobe, but Yobert can help with that. He has suitable enough outfits that they can be at least presentable. But I think, as you are, you are landing, you're given basically clearance to set the castle down in a park nearby the palace, where you have an escort waiting. There's a number of guards there, including some paladins in golden armor that have like spectral golden wings, that greet you.
Ooh.
And I think Yobert is accompanying you as well in his little his fancy wheelchair, and all of you are, promptly escorted right into the Imperial Palace. And I think you've never been in the formal parts before, right? When you met with the friend of the Emperor, he kind of had you in some of like the back rooms, in some of the admin parts, but now you're sort of being brought through the actual fancy diplomatic parts.
Somebody got close enough with Ivy.
It was me.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, okay,
I went in
that's
with
right.
Ivy once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess this would be only you maybe that has seen this stuff, unless someone else, like those of you
I can
who
pretend to look unimpressed.
were on a school tour or something like that. I suppose they do that sometimes.
Lynn
You
can wear their unimpressed face, quite literally.
But so you are brought
Maudlin.
through some of the big, impressive, ornate halls with lots of fancy artworks and everything. But there is a little bit of a feeling of like hushed urgency. You're not given time to luxuriate in your surroundings at all. You're being escorted briskly. And once you are brought into, there's a big room with an enormous kind of conference table with a lot of different chairs around it, and there are a lot of different people already inside that had been having a conversation but stop as you enter, and they're all kind of looking to you eagerly. And there's a couple of dozen different individuals in here, but certainly you see that there are wood elves and dwarves and high elves, and there's a recognizable white-haired druid figure who waves at you. And I think you realize, probably first, Lynn, you realize that she is sitting next to a high elf looking very distinguished, who is herself sitting next to a dwarf with a graying beard. And I think that Lynn
Lynn
is probably
promptly
the first
passes
to
out.
realize that you are probably in the presence now of at least 3 of the heroes of legend. And I think you also recognize that there is a strange creature that looks something like sort of a fox monkey, who is kind of like sitting on the, like, cross-legged in the middle of the like, not in the, like, the very center of a circular table, but just like not sitting in a chair, just sitting on the table in front of the chair. And then there are lots of other representatives here. You see another high elf wearing yellow robes, and she is with a couple of humans, and there are just lots of humans here as well, and a couple of gnomes and a halfling or two, and just this is a big diplomatic sort of assembly, and you watch as you are sort of brought in, and everyone is kind of looking to you, and one of the someone who's like in a page uniform says, the rest of the assembly will be here in just a moment, please. And shortly, just like only a few moments later, Zinhorn, you recognize the highest priest of Rushama, who lives in Pashan, as opposed to the elves, who live on Mount Rushama. Walks in with someone who is in very fancy Solomonia robes, and seems to have a very significant position of authority because has a demeanor of like serene, unbothered, whereas the priest of Rashama is looking a little bit annoyed with them as they come in. And trailing behind both of them is Nelson Devereaux, friend of the Emperor, who looks like he's not been getting enough sleep. And also is a little frustrated, perhaps, but sees all of you arrive and gives you like a nod where he's behind the priests, and so he's kind of giving you like, yes, I see you there. I can't say hi right now. So once these two priests have come in and everyone kind of starts like settling into position, you are kind of basically been given the stage, so to speak. Pages ask if you want chairs, but it's clear that you're going to be interrogated by the room here.
I would like to think that, like, backtracking just a few seconds.
Sure, sure.
that as we come in and Carolina recognizes her heroes sitting
Mhm.
there, that she actually like starts to falter a little bit. And I go to try to keep her from falling over, but we're both so weak and pathetic in our bodies that we both kind of like stumble a little bit.
Making a good first impression, always good.
Gotta be cool. Gotta be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the
Um,
heroes.
I thought they'd be taller.
so yeah, do you like accept chairs or anything, or are you just gonna?
A chair to stand on, perhaps.
Right.
I'm
Um,
good.
so as as a means of introduction, Nelson Devereaux does kind of sort of stand up to speak to everyone at the table first, and just says, "Now I know that we have been through a lot of these issues and discussions over the last day or so, and struggling with how little information we have. And this is why I have brought this assemblage here, whom I have worked with in the past and whom I believe were on the trail of these very mysteries before they even exploded into such direct conflict with all of our various peoples. And I believe that they are in a position to tell us quite a bit that we don't already know. And I hope that you will all give them the respect and understanding of experts on the current crisis, without necessarily assuming that they have responsibility for the current crisis." And he looks at the priest of Solomonia there when he says that part. And so I looks to the rest of you and says, so if we might, give us first a brief high-level version of what you believe to be happening now with regard to the sudden appearance of these strange portals and creatures emerging from them, as well as the reappearance of the island that we believe to be known as Dinuther. And so, again, you can, if you like, give the high-level version here, but I think what
Can
we're
I
going
just roll for it?
well, what I was just going to say, yeah, is that I think we
lot.
want to probably abstract that we're just going to have a lot of questions about like what's been going on, and you can fill in like
We'll do
what
the
you know.
high level version of the high level version.
Yeah. Well, and so
here's
what,
our backstory.
sure. But like as far as rolling for it, like absolutely. I think you can, like as a storyteller, you can use a performance roll. I am not going to give you disadvantage for being peppered with questions, some well-meaning, some hostile, some softballs, but like there's a lot of people who are upset and angry and scared right now. And you are the one that's coming to tell them how bad the problem is, right? So people are not necessarily glad to see you, or at least not everybody is. There's a lot of confusion and concern in the room. But so, without you necessarily having to actually say what you say in character, let's get a performance roll to see how well you tell the story. Also, key to this is let me know if there's anything you are like explicitly leaving out or trying to obscure.
Yeah, I think that one of the difficulties is trying to find a place to begin, and every time that they speak, it's sort of goes back further and further to the point of prehistory and the making of the universe and when the Titans were first conceived of. And
Yeah. Well, I mean,
so,
that's part of what I'm saying, like we're attributing to this performance role. But yeah, absolutely, that's a problem.
it's weird right
So-
now because 3 out of the 4 top skills that Vertigo has are Arcana, History, and Religion, and it feels like all 3 of them are appropriate.
I could say if you are helping, you could let's give advantage to.
So if
performance
this
check.
is a performance check
Mhm.
or a performance roll, I have I don't know why, but I now have a plus 16 to, to performance.
Yeah. Because
Okay.
you're a bard who has a specialty and expertise in performance. That's why. Because you guys are
Yeah,
high
doesn't it
level
do, like-
characters, and you have double your proficiency bonus plus your charisma skill on that. That's why. It's not for some reason. Because you're really good at this.
So I closed roll 20, but I rolled an 18, so 18 and 16 is 34.
Yeah. So I think that you are able to summarize everything, without getting too bogged down in various details, but you're able to convey the essential truth of what's happening in a relatively straightforward way. You're occasionally interrupted by questions, but you're able to keep those questions from getting you too off in the weeds and holding true to the basic central thesis here of that the portals are caused by the destruction of the shield that was obscuring the island. That's why they both happened at the same time. There are many dangers still to be found on the island. There are also dangers associated with the tears in reality, and of course the pillar itself. And you have as object witnesses, Talitha, Trandanel, and Rupino. You have your own experiences with it, and then leading up to basically highlighting that your understanding of the current threats are that the construct makers may be planning some sort of, hostile expansion, and that the siphoners are a serious threat, but you don't know, you haven't really communicated with them at all. You just are aware of them. You have fought that big dragon before, but it was very dangerous. And that you are aware of these different machine pieces, which may, if collected together, help you do something, ? So I think you're able to kind of summarize that for everybody. And for the most part, I think you, with that highest score, are very aware too of, well, you know what? Let's make this a different skill. You told the story exceptionally well. Anyone who wants to read the audience needs to make an insight check.
Hmm. 15 for me, so
15.
Insight?
Yeah.
Yeah. 24.
9.
All right. Were you making one, Vertigo, or no?
I'm just going to assume he's lost in his own
Okay,
thoughts
that's
and
fine.
taking notes at this point. His
Sure,
insight's
sure.
terrible, so
Yeah, so by and large, I think, you know, Lynn and Zinhorn are getting the most out of this. Zinhorn, I think you're gleaning the most, and you're certainly seeing a degree of maybe like a self-assuredness from the priest of Solomonia, where like a little bit of a reaction of like, this is all very serious, but I'm not really worried, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm having people tell me what their problem is, and then I will be able to solve it, is kind of the attitude you're getting from them. And for several others, you are seeing kind of a skepticism when you talk about the construct makers as being potential threat. Um, and for you know, some confusion when you talk about the siphoners. That seems to be new information to everybody else. Like no, like some of these various pieces that you've mentioned, people had little bits and pieces of already, but the siphoners seems to be something that nobody's heard about before. And I think the when you talk about the dragon, that seems to spike concern amongst one particular faction, whom you suspect is probably the delegation from Villanocta, which includes an elf in yellow robes.
Which version of Melicanth do we have, I wonder?
Um, if you want, do you want to try to make the check?
I will give it a shot.
How about this? I will let Lynn make a history check with advantage because she's so good at knowing the Heroes of Legend story. Anyone else who has proficiency can make a regular roll with history, just to try to guess what the deal. But yes, it is Melicanth, but which one?
16.
Okay. Um, I don't know if anyone else is actually rolling. You're kind of just not saying anything. It's fine. 16 with a
I
16.
don't have it.
Okay, well, I do.
17 was my
Okay,
first roll.
so
I tried rolling a bunch of times, but
that's
I
fine.
succeeded once.
So, in any case, I think both of you know that Melicanth the Younger is how she is referred to now, is the one that was essentially brought forward from the frozen time bubble, um, and didn't have that extra long, extra experience, and more cosmic awareness, is the one that stayed on as a magic advisor to Villanocta. Melicanth the Older's whereabouts unknown. She kind of drifted away, and nobody kind of knows what she's been up to. But so
I
you
think
suspect?
she probably upset a lot of people. So
Yeah, there was a lot of people who had complicated feelings about her whole deal. But yes, so in any case, you suspect this would almost certainly be Melicanth the Younger, or else it would be a bigger deal that she's here. But yes, so in any case, though, um, I think that at this point, Nelson Devereaux looks to all of you and just says, "So I specifically wanted to have you all present your testimony before we tainted your impressions with our more recent information, but I can now share with you some of what we know, and I hope that perhaps you can give us your insights, your thoughts on this. Certainly, I think you must be aware that these strange tears to, I guess, what must be the realm of dream, the plane of dream, have been opening unpredictably. Sometimes they close and then open in another location, but frequently creatures are emerging from it, and these creatures are dangerous when they emerge in places that are not, able to protect themselves. These creatures are not indestructible, but it also seems as though they are never ending. They just kind of keep coming. They're not emerging like an army, rather here and there, but certainly enough that they're causing quite a bit of chaos, not to mention the fact that when they emerge somewhere that we don't have standing military, they're very destructive, and it has spread our resources incredibly thin everywhere but in Pashan, where we have, thanks to Empress Solomonia, quite a degree of extra protection here. And he has a little bit of a grimace when he's saying that. He's saying, but so far we've been able to keep here Pashan relatively safe, fighting off these emergencies as soon as they arrive. But many of our outlying territories are not so lucky, not to mention places outside of the Tashmian Empire altogether. You may or may not have heard that a dragon, which we now believe must be the nightmare dragon that you encountered, has attacked Villanocta. It has forced an evacuation of the palace there and most of the surrounding district. There has been no successful attempt to drive it off, and it appears to be settling in, making a lair of some sort. The city has not been more broadly evacuated simply because where else could they go? If they were to become refugees out in the wilderness, they would be all the more vulnerable to the nightmare creatures attacking from everywhere. And so long as they are staying out of the dragon's immediate territory, they seem to be safe-ish for the moment, but this does not seem like a tenable long-term solution, not least because a nightmare dragon is making its lair in the Villanocta Palace. And Melicanth does, speak to that and just says, I have been sent and given rather specific direction to negotiate for what assistance might be rendered without surrendering Villanoctan sovereignty. That is my directive, and I suspect that directive was given without a full understanding of the true scope of the problem. So what I would suggest is that whatever can be done must be done, or else the city will fall altogether, and I suspect that would be bad even for the Tashmian Empire. And then Nelson continues, it says, now these siphoner creatures you mention, to hear you tell it, there is an expectation that there might be a great number of them, but in our intel so far, we have not received any sort of indication of these. We have been scrying on the island where we can. We have not seen any indication of that so far. We don't know where they might have gone, but we have not been able to detect these creatures at all so far. As for the construct makers, I feel like I heard both. The only contact we've had from them to date has been them extending communications and emissaries to various outlying territories, offering their aid in combating the nightmare creatures.
Their aid will come at a serious cost.
There has been some wariness on that front. As of right now, my understanding is that the local government in Emersham has already accepted a protection agreement of some kind with them, but we have not been able to verify the precise details of what agreement they've made, but there has been sightings and landings of some of these enormous constructs seen in Emersham. We know that there have been emissaries received in both Gorn and the Lochtor Forest, and those so far have been stalled at our request. There has been no promises made, and yet right now the only contact that we've had with them at all has been them offering their assistance. And there are many who are currently desperate and might well look to anyone who can promise them help, even if there may be a cost to be paid later.
All I can think about is the people that we saw at their headquarters and just the way they just dropped when Zinhorn set off the smoke. It was like, so I think visually just see Lynn just goes a little pale just at the thought of these people. And it's a very insidious kind of invasion. Quietly offering help. Like
Yeah.
they're the good guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, as Zinhorn said, at a very, very steep price.
Yeah. And the cost is delayed, but they basically turn people into little magical batteries, and it's never enough for them. They continue to come back and make more contracts and bind people to them more and more and more.
Power.
I think that a human that you don't recognize says, "We understand your hesitation, sir, but there are people dying right now due to monsters appearing out of nowhere. There's a lot of people who would accept some sort of a bad long-term contract in order to not have their family killed today.
These
Are
not
you
easy
presenting some
times.
alternative to them?"
We have to close the portals.
There's some buzz. It's like, do we know any way to do that?
Not yet.
There is another group that might help. Smaller, more, well, less organized. They were resistance on the island, composed of a lot of good people, I think, and constructs who've become self-aware. They might be concerned about stretching themselves thin, but if you can offer them a place, I think they would accept that far more than any contract the makers might make. But your best legal minds should probably be the ones checking those contracts. You will win the moment, but you will lose the long year. And they will wish they were dead.
And I think there's a couple of people who are just still just like, you seem very certain of that, but it sounds as though people on the island were working for them voluntarily.
Well, what is voluntarily when, you're faced with these nightmares that you have no way of defending yourself against, and then being presented with a contract like, oh, here, we can help. But you don't realize what you're signing away.
Well,
So
we
if
are
you
very
survive-
familiar with that situation because it is, in fact, the situation that we are all in right now.
Oh, I know.
I think Amethyst stands up and says, "All right, y'all. This is something that we're all really scared about. But I've had my own contact with each of these people up here. They've made some new friends. I don't know them yet, but I trust them. I think that they have everybody's best interest in heart. And so I think if they're warning us away, they're not doing that without cause. And then I think the dwarf who is sitting next to in that little Heroes of Legend group, Alaric kind of says, "I want to know more about this machine. What is this machine supposed to be?"
Just a side note, I'm enjoying hearing all of the impressions Christiana has of us.
Did you not hear my question?
It's difficult to answer because, in truth, we do not know all about it and could not know at the time. Our meeting with the source was difficult and beyond our true understanding. But there is hope that once assembled, this machine can bring some balance, can change the point of view, I suppose, ultimately, on what is happening.
Well, I have some access to an ancient dwarven artifact that can sometimes illuminate history of artifacts from the period of the Titans. And maybe I can use that to dig up some information about the pillar and what other artifacts might be connected to it in dwarven lore. Maybe we can track down a piece or two of that, whatever it's supposed to do.
That would be most helpful. And that
Very
is one of the things that we need from all of you. We will provide you with whatever information we have, what guidance we can. I have a spell that I can teach to others, and they can teach to others to detect some of the more insidious areas of this corruption, this infection, I suppose. There's not really a word for this in a way. But in turn, we will be seeking the root of the problem. We will help where we can. We do not want to leave any of you in a lurch. But it will be more than just us that needs to solve this.
I think Nirkina Ethu, the high priestess of Rushama, from Fabrishah, speaks up and says, "Well, there are a lot of problems that need to be solved right now, and I think that primarily what we need to decide is where best to focus our resources. It seems like you know an awful lot more than we do, and it seems as though right now we had been treating the construct makers, whatever they are, as at least a wariness, but someone we could choose to either accept their help or not. But if they are to be treated as an active threat, then that just adds to our list of enemies. We are already struggling to deal with the incursions of the monsters, but it seems as though if there are bigger threats that must be handled first, we must find them."
I believe the construct makers are not a. It's difficult to explain. The help they offered comes with a very steep cost. And I believe this is just their first steps in. And some of them may have good
don't
intentions.
misunderstand. No, I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to suggest that they are not, that they are to be trusted, rather. I'm simply saying we had been treating them as a party that was not in and of themselves hostile, but rather that they were offering help which we could either accept or deny. But it sounds as though you are saying that they should be treated as a threat in and of themselves.
The different
Yes.
sort of threat. More of a
It's a more pernicious threat. They're
more
kind of like
subtle one.
ticks. They will burrow into you and tell you all of the good that they're doing, and they may even provide some short-term good, but in the long run, they will bleed you dry.
Now, we must be careful to characterize all of them the same. There are those who have turned away from that lifestyle. There are those who have rebelled against it, and I believe that those at the top who hold the most reins are the most dangerous. But if they were to step aside, perhaps there would be better people to deal with below them. But unfortunately, the chains are strong.
I think Melicanth says, if right now what we are all performing is threat assessment, triage, if you will, may I remind the council that there is a great big dragon that has occupied the city of Villanocta.
Is there not another dragon in that area who could offer assistance?
There are, yes, I know the dragon of which you speak. Sitzlebek has so far been struggling with some of the incursions in his own territory, and I think that if he were here on this council, I would ask for his help as well. He has not yet responded to our communiques.
We might be able to put in a word.
I think Nira and Alaric look at each other and just say, "We'll talk to him." And
No, we will.
so is that the solution then? We're asking the other dragon for help? No resources from the Tashmian Empire to be devoted to protecting Villanocta? And then I think one of the Tashmian Empire people just says, "Oh, now you want our protection, do you? I thought your sovereignty meant everything. Can't possibly give up that, but you want our help regardless. What are we getting for our assistance? Seems as though if the dragon is going to settle there, that becomes not our problem."
This is how we lose. These are small concerns. Offer aid. Do not ask for anything else. The people you aid will be the ones who can aid you. And it will not be one empire, one powerful being, one set of legends that can make the difference. It will be everyone working together as much as we can.
Make a persuasion check with advantage, because I think there are some people ready to really hear that message.
We should have called
That
upon
was
the ancestors.
literally the message from the Heroes of Legend.
Yeah.
That's a dirty 20 with advantage.
Nice. So I think that some of the conflict that you had sensed beginning to brew, and I think some of you sense that like some of these are arguments that they've been having like over and over again already in the last couple of days. Some of that seems to cool and settle a little bit. And then all of a sudden the high priest of Solomonia stands up and says, "I have been given a directive. Empress Solomonia's glorious paladins and clerics, newly endowed with her holy power, will aid this council in whatever tasks they should see fit to assign them to. Although certainly it must be understood that if they are to be directed elsewhere, their level of protection that they can extend to Pashan itself will be correspondingly diminished. But we represent an asset to this council in we'll assist in whatever way is deemed the most helpful, because we are here to help."
Can I make an insight check?
Yeah.
Because I feel like That comes at some kind of weird cost that
Sure.
they're not expressing to us.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are going to take a different tactic and cast Detect Nightmare. Should have done that
13.
earlier,
Okay,
but-
you're gonna cast a spell. Cast.
No, Detect
Oh,
Nightmare.
okay. Well, so 13. I think with the 13, you don't like get anything specific beyond just your sort of already built-in suspicion that's like, maybe. I mean, I think for all you know, it may just be as simple as if they help out, they get credit for helping out, they look good. Right? It could be as simple as that, right? Like even like there could be a sincere desire to help. It could also just be we get brownie points if we help, right? You don't get anything more than that. But
More people worship Solomonian.
I think as you start to cast a spell, the spell, I should say, not dispel, vertigo, uh, I think Yobert sees you getting ready to do that, and he kind of puts a hand on your shoulder and just says, "Don't be casting strange spells suddenly in a room like this. If you want to cast the spell, I would request that you present that to the room rather than simply casting an unexpected spell suddenly. I think you would probably result in 5 or 6 different counter spells from this table because they don't know what you're doing."
Interesting point. Very interesting.
Would like to see what.
I'm not telling you you can't cast the spell. I'm telling you don't do it by surprise without mentioning it.
And he will stop casting the spell. Looking to the others, though, because it looked like Lynn was about to do something. Fireball.
I'm curious if Talitha
Are-
has any thoughts.
Okay. I think that make an insight check.
The reason that I thought of her is
Yeah.
because she was, part of the original contingent of people that were fighting against these nightmares.
Mhm.
Right. So she may have some experience with what it's like when
Sure.
a place is overrun, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if they also had tears in Denethor like this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she
Yeah.
might have some input.
She's been staying quiet, but go ahead and make an insight check. I mean, if you're just watching her.
That was pretty good. This is a 31.
Wow, okay. I think that what you're actually seeing her right now is it's kind of a complex stew, right? Because on the one hand, this feels all too familiar. But on the but what happened with her the last time she tried this is that she ended up with an extremely painful solution that turned out to be all too temporary. And now it's just happening again, and what was all that suffering for? Right? So there's an aspect of that. But you do see a little bit of maybe it'll be different this time, but she's afraid that it's just happening again. And she's basically, you kind of get the impression that she's not talking because she feels like what I tried didn't work. We need to see what other people say. I think because you know her this well and throughout, I think that you get the impression that the one thing that she might really speak up on is if anyone was suggesting, let's go try to use the pillar to fix this. And so far, no one has really said that out loud, although who knows, maybe people are thinking it. But I think in your pitch, you made it pretty clear that the pillar is scary. It should not be considered it's not a shotgun to be picked up and wielded. So I gave you a lot, but that's because you got a 31.
Um, I guess I have, yeah. I would want to ask her about
Mhm.
when this was first happening in Denethir. What were some of the problems that you encountered in trying to like? What was that like, and what mistakes were made that we can maybe avoid? Do you have any advice?
Well, I wish I could give you more specific guidance beyond don't do what we did. But we resorted to using the pillar again because things seemed too big and too overwhelming, as though nothing short of that level of power could fix it. But I think what I've come to realize is that the problems are too big for any simple solution. We resorted to the pillar because it seemed like the easiest solution. It was the one that we thought would work right away and just solve our problems with an immediate outcome. And then only later did we realize that an immediate outcome sometimes requires a potential eternity, or at least an indefinite sacrifice. And I think it may be that there is no one answer to this. There are several problems. They are not all the same problem. Even if they had a single origin, they are not the same now and do not require the same strategy.
I think what we still haven't quite figured out is why there is just this enormous influx of nightmare energy. I mean,
Well, I think
it's the one thing we haven't really pinned down exactly.
I want to basically say that this has been at least partially answered like amongst your group in terms of the various studies, that even though this is kind of a high level sort of oversimplified way to put it, that essentially what happened here is that the nightmare energy had been so concentrated within that bubble for so long that it built up and built up and built up until the point that when the bubble went down, it was like a grenade going off, sending shrapnel everywhere. That is what's happening. Now, that's not to say, like, that is why all these portals are happening and these nightmares are coming in. But it is still all that is kind of tied to, like, the pillar is kind of continuing to just be like a faucet, adding more and more and more, right? But the reason that all the portals happened is because of that sort of psychic shockwave that resulted from the bubble going down.
I wonder if it's even possible to get rid of the pillar.
Well, that's what Kosh's machine is supposed to be for. in theory.
Oh, is that what it's in theory? It's for? I
Well,
thought we
well,
were
like,
doing-
I mean, no, I mean, what he said is the whole point. He described it not as destroying it or getting rid of it, but allowing it to be seen a different way, which is his proposed solution, is that it must be seen a different way. He suggested that was the only thing to be done.
Hmm. Maybe if it were seen like a tree in a forest, then nobody could find it. I don't know,
Okay.
but um,
So we have a couple different problems and we need some solutions. We
Mhm.
need the
Yep.
machine, obviously, but that's going to require research and
Mhm.
probably very small groups of people going to fetch these things, right?
and we are a small group of people.
Right. But this could be these pieces could be scattered all over the place. So and we can only be so many places. At
So
once.
are you kind of addressing the group at large still now, or are you kind of just like
Yes.
whispering to your friends? Okay. All right. I think that you have, Alaric had already indicated his willingness to help with some of that from his end, but also I think um, someone you don't necessarily recognize, but who looks to be wearing kind of some sort of an official robe, just says, certainly we can delegate some of our own Imperial research staff to searching our own resources for any information which might yield fruit on this matter, if that is a priority for the council. And I think there's some general agreement that it's like, sure, why not? It seems like there's a lot of people. I think you get an impression that for many of the people at the council, the stuff that they can actually like go and talk to or fight right now seems much higher priority than finding the pieces of some machine that might do something that you learned about in a dream.
Well,
Yeah.
getting there.
Sure. No, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a handful of them taking you seriously on that, but you get the impression that the majority of the council is like, that's kind of whatever. And the rest of it is real problems.
So that is more of a long-term solution, I think. Hopefully not too long, because I think that's going to address the root of the problem here. But in the meantime, we've got these symptoms of the larger problem. We have the dragon and we have the tears, right? So for the dragon in Villanocta, our esteemed guests have volunteered to reach out to him, to Sitzlek, for assistance. Do we have a backup plan? Let's talk about solutions and not what's in the way.
I think Nelson says, I have a strike team that is not necessarily optimally configured for dragon fighting specifically, but as a support unit for another dragon, I think we could provide some help in that regard.
This thing is brutal. Like, it's we only just barely survived it, and that was with the interference of a Fey port.
Yeah, all the more reason to not underestimate it and send one of our powerful units against it alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next problem.
And I
is
also
the
forgot that
tears.
Nelson has a southern accent like this. I had to say it properly.
Okay, so the other problem is the tears, correct? Now, is stuff is coming out of these tears, correct?
Yeah, it's basically the like Tanglefoot style monsters. Seems to be like they're not always the same. There's other things, but that's the majority.
We still don't know where those are. Those things like from the
Yeah,
nightmare realm?
basic,
or-
yeah, so you had been given sort of a very sort of feathery sort of description that they are essentially kind of a reflection of this nightmare corruptions form that that it takes or can take in the plane of dream, that with these tears in place can just walk on over instead of having to filter themselves through more abstracted energy. But what do they even want is unclear, because you know, for example, that they have been, even before this, trying to infiltrate various power structures. I think actually at some point, at this point, they will say, once you warned us about this, we actually did find several functionaries within the palace itself that were these creatures in disguise. And we believe that we have stripped any presence that they might have had in our organization, but we know they're out there.
So
Sometimes they come
has
back.
anybody had any luck with closing one of these tears?
I think Nira actually speaks up with this as saying, I was working as best I could with the spirit of Rushama on this very problem. And the challenge is that they are in many respects like a wound in the veil between planes. And in some respects, like a wound on a body, they could, given time, heal themselves. But at present, they are infected in such a way that they are being held open. There are too many, and it is causing too much blood loss for the body, so to speak, to heal itself naturally. But we believe that if the source of the energy that is pouring through could be reduced, they would go away by themselves. But in lieu of that, closing one would likely just result in another opening somewhere else. And just say, and believe me, there were some frustrating experiments on that regard.
I'm just wondering, given the past stories of the heroes of legend, if one of them happened to decide to try to jump through one to see what was on the other side, which involved the whole rescue operation.
Oh,
Can't imagine which one of them would have
yeah.
died.
They say
I mean,
frustrating
Amethyst is known for
experiments.
hopping
Yeah.
dimensions.
So I will just go ahead and suggest that when she says frustrating experiments, there's a little bit of a sidelong accusatory glare at Alaric. I think he just doesn't even really notice. um. So
Jenny, were you going to say something? Sorry.
Right. So
I don't remember what it was.
So Nelson says, so my own strike team can potentially assist Sitzlebeck if he can be persuaded to take on the Nightmare Dragon in Villanocta. What about the construct makers? How should we try to handle them so far? It sounds as though accepting any of their contracts should be a last resort, if that. But it sounds also, though, that many who are in desperate positions might begin to be tempted by those contracts and give them a foothold in Sekamian.
So let me refresh my memory. The pipe that Zinhorn has, was that made by Rupino?
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't. Wait. No. Was it? Yes, it was. You
I
got it
think it
in that
was, yeah.
auction house. Yes, it was. Sorry, I
Yeah.
was trying to remember because obviously, you know, Isilda had, you know, um, done some of that stuff too. So, but that was later. But yes, the pipe was Rupino's.
I'm wondering, maybe gonna actually look at Rupino.
Hmm.
Do you think you could replicate that? Um, the pipe that draws out the nightmares and
Hmm.
like they turn into these little spheres. Um, do you think you could replicate that on a like a larger not a larger scale but like more of them?
I mean,
Or
that one took me 18 months to make. I mean, I suppose it would be faster to make another because I'm just repeating it. And I suppose if we had magical resources and people helping, we could potentially make more faster. But uh, even though that seems to have a dramatic initial effect, if I'm not mistaken, it seems to have its most dramatic effect on the low level workers. And if some people here have already started accepting the contracts, it's almost certain that they're going to have the worst terms and might suffer the most.
Well, I was thinking maybe it could be turned more to the purpose of like these tears, like the and as a means of essentially staunching the blood flow. um, if there's some way it could be adapted for a purpose like that, to
I mean, I
kind
believe
of
the construct
band-aid.
makers do that sort of thing. They are siphoning off. That
I
word
mean,
becomes difficult, but they are extracting that energy as well. So
uh,
they have more means to do that in the meantime.
I think Trandonel says this is precisely the concern with the construct makers is that my understanding of their misuse of this whole magic leaves them in a prime position. Not only are these nightmare incursions something that they are skilled at dealing with, but every time they do it, they empower themselves. So, if anyone would be adept at drawing that nightmare energy and channeling it, it would be they. I am sure that their technology is much superior to your pipe at this point, Rupino. No offense. And Rupino is just kind of like, they've had like a long time to work on it. I wasn't like they've. And he's like, that's not the point. Uh, right now, that is what they are doing, and they are consolidating their power. But it is also true that, in that sense, it is not in their interest to entirely eliminate that problem, because then people will stop paying them to solve it.
I would wonder whether it would be all right to offer them essentially access to that energy rather than access to the people's energy. Put them on the problem of getting their own resources, allow them to do so, knowing that it is only buying time, as most of these things are.
Um, Telethus says, the nature of the problem is that they always need more. There is no enough for them. Every resource they spend is in the interest of interest, so to speak. I don't think they could ever be satisfied with only pulling energy from one source and not another.
Again, I do wish to be cautious about painting them with a singular brush. One of the good things that has come out of what they've done is the creation of constructs with their own will. And that, if that were the only thing that was produced, would be the best use of that energy ever, I think.
Keep in mind that consciousness did come with a cost. If you recall our visit to the observatory.
I think that I think that what Trandanel says to that is like, I have had to reckon myself with some of this thinking when I found myself falling to some of this corruption. The form that took in me was that sort of unreasoning judgment, all or nothing, black and white. And so I think I concur with you that this is not meant to suggest that every individual within those behemoth organizations is personally responsible for the decisions it makes. However, together they have built a system that does great harm. And I believe that system is bigger than any one of those individuals. So while we may wish to extend the benefit of the doubt to a person, I don't think we can to the organization. In some ways, that is its power. No one individual is solely responsible.
Even a well-woven rug can have a snag and become undone. Huh. Something my grandmother used to say. She was a weaver.
I was
I
going
never
to
really
say,
understood what you meant.
that wasn't what I was saying, but I don't want to stop you. You may be onto
No,
something there.
you are correct. It is a very tightly bound organization, and there is no simple deconstructing it, but finding snags and pulling on them over
Yeah.
time.
And I think Talitha says, this is an important point to be made, though, that I hope is understood by everyone, which is to say that while we talk of the threats that the construct makers represent when we describe them in this way, that should not be meant to understand that everyone from Dinuther falls into this category, and not least all constructs. There are many constructs, as we've been told, that have become part of the resistance and fight this.
Kind of look over at Sequential on this side of the room as well.
Um, and I think actually you might remember that like part of your story was learning that even though it kind of created its own complications, that one of the previous sort of pillar wishes had been like to eliminate the construct maker's ability to enforce like control even over the sentient constructs. Like right now, sentience isn't something they can decide whether it happens or not, and if it does, they can't undo it. And so that means that some of them rebel, but some of them don't.
I think what we can offer to those here and to the groups that they will also speak to is some knowledge, some defense, and some strategy against the tears and the minor things that are to come. We can also offer a request, if you will, that more be found of those other deeper mysteries, that the machine might be built, that we might be able to change the nature of the center of the problem. In the meantime, I don't know if the construct makers can be dissuaded, or we simply allow them to happen as another force that's aligned for the moment. But I am concerned about this dragon and its presence.
At this point, the little fox monkey sitting on the table that has been just listening at this point says, I think all of you are missing a trick here. It seems to me that out of all of the big threats you described, there's just one of them that nobody knows anything about where they are. Where'd they go? The siphoners. They just disappeared, you think? I don't think so. I think the fact that we don't have any idea where they are might just make them the biggest threat.
I may be able to offer a spell which can help to see them, but you do make a point.
What if their nature, like, because they essentially just siphon away the life energy and magic from a person. So what's to say that like scrying and stuff is even going to work on them? Maybe they just kind of absorb it. I don't know.
Or even disrupt it enough to be useless.
There's a lesson that we all get taught at the monastery. And it's the lesson of the shell game. The whole idea is that you get people looking one way, but that's not where the P is. Right? And the trick is not that they didn't realize where the P actually is. The P is in your hand. Doesn't matter where they look. Because if you're good at running the shell game, the P can be wherever you want it to be. Or it can be nowhere. We didn't hear you there, Starla.
I was just adding, no one can resist the shell
yeah,
game.
yeah. It's like, it's true. No one can resist the shell game. I could see the words in your mind. So what I'm thinking here is, it sounds to me like if these things were just like animals, or like, or even just like a desperate, like panicky crowd of like starving creatures, how could they hide? If they're hiding somewhere, someone is in charge. We need to be looking for who's running the shell game, not just looking for individuals.
Volunteering?
I guess.
We did not get a chance to closely look at them, so we don't really know their nature.
And then
But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, we did encounter a number of creatures that were influenced, and it may be the same here. Perhaps that's their nature, is to be influenced as others have been, manipulated, as you suggest.
So I had a brief thought with the mention of these tears being wounds, and then these creatures coming through them, right? So the first time that we encountered one of these creatures, it was trapped in a actual physical cage, with a anti-magic field, right?
Mhm.
And it couldn't do anything. Couldn't get out. It was just there. So if these tears are kind of like wounds, maybe putting a bandage on them would allow them to heal.
I think they were
Something
described
like
as closing and reappearing elsewhere, though, at random.
Well, but we wouldn't be closing them. We would just be enclosing them. Does that make sense?
I think they were closing on their own, but if not, then this definitely has possibilities. We might be able to hold the wound open in order to close it.
I think Rupino is saying, sounds like what we want is, instead of trying to just paper over a mouse hole, what we want is some mouse traps.
Another thought comes to mind, which is probably more dangerous. If they are all from the same source, and not individual wounds, but rather an expression of a larger entity, if you will, or wound, it may, although the mechanism is opaque to me at the moment, it may be possible to rend open the largest wound and simply draw all the wounds together in one place. And when it's done, perhaps then it could be cauterized or bandaged or contained. It would be tremendous, however, but it might at least concentrate it. If not everywhere, then perhaps done more than once. I don't know if there's a medical equivalent to it. Zinhorn might have a better instinct in that. It's more of an abstract theory and magical idea.
Yeah, it doesn't quite mesh with how medical stuff works. You would just be making more places
Let us
for
then
important stuff to leak out.
move to a different domain, which is probably more in Lynn's actual domain. But consider these not to be wounds. Then consider them to be points of attention. And if you can bring all the points of attention to one spot, concentrate that attention. I don't know how that's done. Lynn does that well. I don't think that singing and dancing necessarily will do that, but I've seen them command a room and draw all attention to them. If that analogy is more useful, perhaps, maybe we could draw all the attention of these spots together, again, to try to concentrate it into something terrible, but something that might be contained. That
Well,
is not
that's-
an ultimate solution, mind you.
That's just. I mean, if these things can be drawn somewhere, because as far like, do we know any different than they're just appearing randomly? Like, does there seem to be any rhyme or reason to it?
There's no pattern that's been like identified as of yet. If there is one, then they don't know what it is. Rupino is saying now. There's been a couple of ideas that I could work on. Like, here's the like it. We could potentially like make a device that, for example, could be placed near one of these tears and designed to try to trap any of these creatures that comes through it. But there's so many of these tears that we would have to make a great number of them. We could try to create something that would draw more of them through any one specific opening so that they wouldn't be coming out of the other ones. But then that creates the immediate problem of having to deal with all of that all at once. These things are not so tough one-on-one when you have someone who's skilled in fighting, but the more of them that you put all in one place, that's the bigger the problem that's going to be. I mean, look, we're dealing with the dragon right now, right? But these are something that we might be able to, like, we definitely have some prototypes of contraptions that can capture these creatures and hold them for at least some period of time. And we don't have like infinite capacity, but maybe some of those things could be adapted for at least short-term use. But boy, I wouldn't want to be around when it finally fills up. I mean, I think then we would just be in the bubble coming down all over again.
Containment is not the ultimate solution, but it might be, as I don't know their name, but as the one Fox said, perhaps it's a sufficient distraction while we can get the rest of the work done.
The fox monkey says, I don't think that's what I said at all. But certainly what you said about the distraction. Yeah, I think that like all of the rest of this is the distraction. So maybe you're onto something there. So, but yeah, so my point is that all of these other things that are obviously problems, those might be the distraction. But I said I'll look into it, and then I think Amethyst reaches over and kind of, scritches him behind the ears, and it just says, "I'll help you look." And then I think that what Rupino starts saying is, what we really need is some way to sort of rapidly create a whole bunch of little tiny pocket dimensions that we can just deposit these creatures in and just seal them off. That could work. I mean, it would take a lot of magical energy, but
Sort of like
Like a
trash
garbage-
dimensions.
Yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
garbage disposal dimension.
Garbage disposals. We could dump a bunch of them in there and then just close the entrance.
I don't think that's a long-term solution.
Eh, it-
I mean, eventually it'll get full, and we'll
I
be
mean,
stuck with the same problem.
trash
Yeah.
dimensions also
That's-
can
that's why
explode,
I
as we
thought
know.
Maybe the band-aid idea was the bandage idea.
That's
was a good
kind of a
idea.
band-aid idea.
yeah. Zaleen, make an insight check. And a religion check.
So 24 insight, dirty 20,
Mm-hmm.
and 24 for religion.
I think that although you certainly understand everybody in this conversation's intentions to be good, I think there's part of this that is feeling to you a little bit like, you know, you were just hearing what Talitha was saying about like what's the right choice here, like in everything that's been kind of happening so far. And although it's certainly true that some of these things might be expedient, there's just parts of it that are starting to feel a little bit too much like repeating the mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
And so
And I
I'm,
think
to be clear, I'm not, as the GM, telling you this is the wrong track. I don't think you should go down it, because obviously you've got a real problem. You're trying to solve it, and there might be a number of different ways you might want to handle it. I'm not trying to say any of them is wrong, but I will say that you're getting a little bit of an itch, like there might be consequences that you're not anticipating to the idea of trying to just, you know, re-encapsulate all of this energy when that was ultimately kind of what started the problem.
I will actually speak up and say that out loud, that we can't do that. That's what happened before, and it didn't work. And there has to be some other way. And Kosh said to look at it from a different angle, to see it differently. So we have to find some way to set that energy completely free.
Suggesting tear open the tears?
Maybe.
One
Make
could argue that what's happening now is the balance returning.
Yeah.
Vertigo, make an Arcana check.
$27.
You remember the experiments you did when you were on Dinit there, of those little adapter devices where once the energy was kind of contained in the little core, it could kind of just be dissipated, which from the perspective of the people who invented that technology would be like, why would you do that? That's like pouring gasoline on the ground, right? It's wasted when you do that, because it's like you've gone to all this trouble to collect a bunch of energy and now you're just letting it dissipate. But I think what you also recognized when that happened is that the energy had been transformed in the process. And while it had been what this energy you've come to think of as this nightmare energy that had been collected and concentrated, that was not the form of the energy once it was released. And it was kind of an expression of like this whole concept of like the idea that there's a price and it has to be paid is kind of you get the feeling that by sort of willingly choosing to just release it and say, like, I have something I could use to power something and do something for myself, but I'm willingly releasing it for no benefit, kind of nullifies the negative quality of it.
There may be some pathway to balance. Rejecting the draw of the power. Although on what scale, I'm not sure. Perhaps that's what the bubble does, is make you aware of the fact that you can reject it. And when you do, it's released, although not entirely until confronted. Maybe you aren't confronting it. Maybe you are in fact confronting the remains of your desires.
And that's why it would be twisted into nightmares, because you let it control. You become consumed with it. All those people, like, think about what happened to that in the caves with the giant creature that basically cursed itself because it wanted to be scary because people had picked on him. It just twists everything because it's selfishness and corruption of the simplest things. Power corrupts at like the deepest level. So that even something as small as wanting to be able to protect yourself would be completely and utterly distorted, like a nightmare.
Unless you were prepared for it. And it really, really worked hard to dispel that part of yourself. I believe there's a path to follow, but it will take more thought.
The path of just releasing that energy back into the universe.
That is part of it.
Ironically, Vertigo, you know that, like, the most straightforward way to release the energy that you have seen so far is actually specifically using the construct maker's own technology for that purpose, right? Like, they have invented all manner of different technology that is designed to specifically capture, harness, and make use of this energy, and it is probably that technology that would be most useful at capturing the nightmares that are out and around there, drawing it out, and then harnessing that energy, which is of course their whole plan. The key is just that in their hands, they're not going to let the energy go. Once they have it, they're going to use it to try to get more. But in some respects, their technology is literally made to do that. It's the kind of almost the whole basis of it.
One question I do have, though. Who wanted the dragon? What is it tied to? And can they be told or suggested to no longer want it?
Maybe no one did. Maybe it was the collection of all of that energy, that refusal to let go, just culminated into this dragon.
Another question which might be relevant, depending on the answer. Why Villa Nocta? What does Villa Nocta have that other places do not? Why go there?
They have a library.
I know.
Mm.
It all comes back to the library.
I mean, Pishon
I mean,
has a
Emirate
library.
Arboris has a
So does
library. Pashana
Emerald
has a library.
Arboris.
But
It's all about the
Yeah.
libraries in the end.
It's the library.
you know, like you, I think that there's a lot of this has gotten esoteric to the point that many of the people in the room are not really following it anymore. So I think that while some of the people listening to this are just like hanging on every word of this conversation, there's several people who are starting to get a little more frustrated. It's like, no, what are we doing today? Like all of this is stuff. Okay, maybe we're going to have people researching this or something or working on an invention, but like, what are we doing right now?
I think the important thing, and I understand that you're afraid. I understand that this is scary, but the important thing is to remember that this did not happen overnight. This wasn't just a snap of a finger and here we are. As much as I wish that there was a solution that would only take a couple of hours, it's taken us a long time to get to where we are now. And I know that you're afraid. But we're going to have to work together, all of us, to solve this. And that's going to include being patient, not feeding that fear any more than it's already been fed.
Make a persuasion check.
I'm scared.
I liked it. I hope you roll high.
21.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I think that the one person who had kind of just sort of spoken out so angrily was, you know, there's a bit of like he's not quite willing to just let it go right away, but he's just kind of like, it is very difficult to counsel patience to people actively fighting monsters, but I do see the wisdom in what you say. So what is the solution then? How best are we to proceed? And I think Nelson says, all right, well, let's start just by some of the decisions we've already made. We are tasking a unit to recruit Sislebek the Dragon to try to either destroy or at least force the Nightmare Dragon to flee from Villa Nocta. It sounds as though Amethyst and forgive me, are you Mugen or are you one of the other ones? And the Fox Monkey just says, gives a big comic shrug. He's like, all right, well, so you're going to try to see if we can find out why we have lost track of these siphoner creatures, correct? I think that we can pass on to everyone in communication with the various representatives on this council that contracts with the construct makers should be avoided at all costs, even though it might seem as though they are able to help with our problem. Where do we think we would best send the Empress Solomonia's paladins and clerics? Are they best used here to protect Pashon, or shall we send them out to other locations to spread the protection out somewhat?
I think you're probably better off spreading the protection out.
How many?
Or establish a safe perimeter here where people from the outside can come and be safe, or safer.
How many people, like how many paladins and clerics are we talking?
Hundreds, but not thousands.
Okay.
And so over a big space that starts to get thin pretty fast. So it's one thing
So
to defend a city, even a big city, but like it thins out really fast if you're starting to have to send them to 5 or 6 different places or extending, a perimeter there. But I mean, at the same time, that's still some protection that, wouldn't be there at all otherwise.
I like Lynn's idea of just sort of building a perimeter around Bashan
Hmm.
and welcoming people here to take refuge.
All right. And that's a lot of logistical considerations, but of course, we are in unprecedented times. So I think perhaps that is for the best, assuming the Empress Solomonia can spare the resources. And then the priest is just saying, I have already said that she will do whatever is required by this council. And perhaps just to illustrate how willing we are to contribute to this, we know of one of the locations of these machine components that you have mentioned. Solomonia tells me that the one known as the chronometer is currently archived in one of the glorious museums on Mount Celestia. We would, of course, be willing to surrender it to such an august party as these adventurers who have brought us all of this information today.
That's very generous.
Extremely generous.
Of course, it is appreciated.
Do tell us when you are free to travel to Mount Celestia, and we will give it to you.
Let me check my appointment book. Oh, look. We're available right now.
Wonderful. We shall await you. And then I think that like Nira and Alaric and Amethyst are kind of giving each other looks like, oh, what's going on here?
I actually was gonna say that, like, while she was talking, I'm like, I kind of want to look at Nira, but also, like, I don't know that.
I think that like there's a moment of that, and then as though they have kind of a like, eyes in the back of their head, so to speak. This priest just kind of glances over there and says, "Solomonia does say hi, by the way."
There's a beard full of muffled swearing.
That one is not going away from me ever. That one's my fault.
I mean, look, there was a lot going on. Sometimes you have to make those choices. I mean, what was your choice?
Die, so,
Right? Yeah, exactly. That's my whole point. Is that like it was not like a casual decision that you made. It was pretty critical. But so in any case, though, so it sounds like at least you have located one of those. So Nelson says, so we've found one of them already. It sounds as though you have 2 in place, and that there would be 3 more we would still need to find. But we've already going to have the resources here at our own libraries begin to try to see what else we can find. And it sounds as though Alaric and perhaps Nirakina Ethu of the Far Rasha will contribute their resources to that search as well. Do we have any? I think we will certainly find that we need further consultation as these plans progress. But is there anything we are missing at the moment?
We come to a decision on the tears. What we're doing there.
Well, if we're trying to get our hands on the
Mhm.
technology from the contract makers, I mean, that's kind of a solution
Mhm.
that we were talking
Yeah.
about.
That's what I was thinking, is we might need to go into the center of their building and take that tour after all. not necessarily bidden.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so Rupanode says, I mean, from your description of the technology, it seems like if we let them do it, they'll do it how they want to do it. And we don't necessarily want to give them that level of extra access and power. But
It's possible that some of the uh, rebellion, the unaffiliated faction in Dinethir, might have some experts among them that could help.
I was thinking of talking to them too.
I think that's a good plan.
so are we going to, if you are all heading more immediately to Mount Celestia for that first item, should we wait for your return to reach out to them, or should we attempt to send a delegation to make contact with these rebels?
You have people that are
trying to
skilled in diplomacy and law, correct?
Naturally.
I think that sending a delegate to them, a delegation, not just a single person, but a delegation to them, would slow them down enough.
I think Amethyst says, I can spare some of my, my, you know, my, what do we call them? The tree climbers, we can spare some of them to, I think we can get you over there. It's funny now that this bubble is popped. It's like I've got a whole branch that I was numb for a while.
Do we have that thing that they gave us to take to the Pillarians? Just a
Or the little
The offering?
authenticator thing?
yeah, it's something so that they know who
That
sent
we
them.
sent them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have that thing, I'm sure. I mean,
Maybe
you wouldn't
if
have.
we send that along like with a letter from one of us.
You
saying,
like
hey,
somebody
help
draw
these
a
people."
picture of us? Somebody just draw like a picture of the
Mhm.
four of us and like these people gave us this
I don't know for
And
the
then
best
with one of your
references.
cards. You just
Yeah.
send them a business card. We got this business card, and they'd be like, "Oh my god, it matches ours."
So I think if we send some sort of, token along with whoever goes to reach out to these folks, then I think we can kind of point them in the right direction and
Oh,
there should be something
for the
to that.
rebels, you mean? I
Yeah,
thought you were
yeah.
saying. I thought you meant the construct makers. We'll send them a
No.
card.
No.
It's like, no, they're not gonna like to hear about us again.
No.
Maybe we'll send them like
Waste
a condolences card.
This card will self-destruct in
5 seconds.
I think Nelson does say, and I think it behooves all of us to recognize that if these construct makers are as sinister as we are reliably informed that they are, then I don't think a blanket refusal to accept any of their contracts is likely to please them or lead them to relax.
Tell your people not to accept everything, or anything really, but to scrutinize and counterpropose constantly. I've found that a barrage of questions is very effective at times.
Did we learn anything about contracts ourselves when we were dealing with the hag in the Feywild? Like, did we
Not
learn
really.
anything important?
Not really. Like her fake
If only we could
contracts are
use that
kind
to
of
break
their
all the
own
contracts.
whole school. Like I think that would be a little bit like if you were an expert in contract law in the United States, that doesn't necessarily give you everything you need for contract law in some other country, right? Like you learned some about how those specific kinds of fake contracts work, and there's probably some overlap, but it doesn't naturally grant you specific expertise.
I'm just imagining
Weird.
that they assemble a crack squad of litigators and contract lawyers who normally just work in offices to go abroad into this terrifying realm with these people, and it's like the weirdest juxtaposition of front line and back line ever.
Yeah.
Weird question before I forget. Did we retrieve the Infinite Facets gem? Or is it still where we left it? Just laying around with
I
some
mean, you didn't go back for it. You
Rod.
We
We
teleported
haven't
away.
actually
think
gone
we
back
went
to that
back for it.
device. We should probably
How
go back
could
to
you?
that device.
At what point would you have gone back
Yeah.
for it? It was left.
I
where
couldn't
you
remember.
made it. So it was left where you had made an opening in the bubble to go in. So it was in the water on your little immovable platform, and then
Maybe we
you
go in that
teleported
direction at some
away
point?
from. You teleported away from the island to back to the Feywild.
Yeah.
So it's still there as far as you know.
hopefully.
Crazy two-stroke
That's all we
engine
need is
still bubbling away.
another crazy hag to get their hands on it.
Just ridiculously powerful magical artifact that grants the ability to see the future. No big deal.
See, we were
Yeah.
distracted at the time.
Left
We get back to our
unattended.
errands eventually.
Yeah, and while we're at it, we'll get my freezing drill spear. You know, that's
Yeah.
it's.
Mhm.
I
That's
understand
not even-
No,
it's
like I look, a lot's been
below
going
the
on. I'm not
infinite
judging you
gems.
guys or suggesting you should have done something differently. You were in a position where you made the best decision you could, but it just so happens that that is where it is, or where you left it anyway.
At least we know where we left
uh,
it.
It's
Kinda.
Deadpool 2. We just go back and we go and fix all the things we forgot along the way.
Yeah.
And Ryan Reynolds dies in one form or another.
Maybe that would be like campaign 3, where we just resurrect our characters and we go back through and do the same stuff, but
The
in
cleanup
a
crew.
different angle.
Yeah. Just as a little button on this, I would like to offer, just as a funny little scene here, that the council is interrupted when one of these tears opens right there and several of these monsters emerge. And yet, because this is a room full of very powerful individuals, they are dispatched with almost comic immediacy. And it's just sort of a brief and bracing little interruption that now a reminder of how serious this whole threat is. One of these little sort of purple, jagged, glowing tears in reality now hovers above this very conference table.
And yes, I know the common thread is me here, but I do kind of imagine on one side is Vertigo and the other side is Alaric, both peering through the
Yeah.
the cut in reality for different reasons. But yeah,
Alaric's like, I'm going in.
You like, yeah, Vertigo, you find Alaric staring just really intently at you for a while, and it's just, I like your goggles.
Thank you. Where did I find them? I don't even remember now. You have a very nice beard.
I think there's a moment where he looks genuinely touched, and then he looks up at Nira and just says, "See, he likes it." And I think Nira's just saying, "I didn't say anything."
All I said was maybe you could use some more beads.
maybe a trim, wash it a little bit more often.
Mm-hmm.
I actually was gonna ask, like, being in this proximity to Alaric, do I get any like weird sensations from the Mistress of the Dark, like memories of him, where she's like,
guy.
that guy?
I think that the Mistress of the Dark ultimately, to the extent that that whole episode changed her at all, it frankly taught her some humility. And she is not really petty about
She's
it.
not holding a grudge.
No.
Although-
Not to mention the fact that, like, in the end, like, she had, like, part of what the whole story with her in campaign 1 was that there was a brief sort of, like, intrusion into her territory without paying the proper obeisance, you know? And then being sort of torn out of her own domain and placed in the material plane against her will, where she was kind of like finding it like it was like disrupting her mind and kind of making her lose herself a little bit. And although you captured her in an embarrassing way, you then did actually proceed to return her to her proper place. Right? So, I mean, in the end, I don't think she's mad about that. It was kind of just like you were part of a very embarrassing episode.
To reference Mugen for a moment, though, where did that bottle come from?
It did just fall out of the sky that day.
Yep.
But yes, so in any case, it sounds like there are some wheels beginning to turn, some plans are in motion. How will that all go? And what does Solomonia want to draw the pocket protectors into Mount Celestia for? Well, we'll find out when we return for more adventure on so many levels.
So
Oh,
many
many
levels
So
of
things
being
and people
trapped.
and no.